Welcome to the Sell My Business podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Feldberg. This podcast is brought to you by Deep Wealth and the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience. Your liquidity event is the largest and most important financial transaction of your life. But unfortunately, up to 90% of liquidity events fail. Think about all that time, money, and effort wasted. Of the quote-unquote successful liquidity events, most business owners leave anywhere from 50% to over 100% of their deal value in the buyer's pocket and don't even know it. I should know. I said no to a 7-figure offer and yes to mastering the art and science of a liquidity event. 2 years later, I said yes to a different buyer with a 9-figure offer. Are you thinking about an exit or liquidity event? If you believe that you either don't have the time or you'll prepare closer to your liquidity event, think again. Don't become a statistic and make the fatal mistake of believing that the skills that built your business are the same ones for your liquidity event. After all, how can you master something you've never done before? Let the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience and our 9-step roadmap of preparation help you capture the maximum value for your liquidity event. At the end of this episode, take a moment to hear from business owners just like you who went through the Deep Wealth Experience. Brenden Kumarasmy is the founder of MasterTalk. Brenden coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become the top 1% communicators in their industry. He also has a popular YouTube channel called MasterTalk with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. Welcome to the Sell My Business podcast. And for all you business owners out there who are thinking of having a liquidity event, I bet dollars to donuts your worst nightmare is that when it's time to make that big presentation where your financial future, the future well-being of your liquidity event hinges on it, that you're gonna flub it. And maybe you even have a fear of public speaking. And here's another loaded question for you. What would you do to become the top 1% communicator in your industry? Does it sound too good to be true, or is there something to that? Is fact stranger than fiction? So Brenden, welcome to the podcast. Such a pleasure to have you with us today. There's always a story behind the story. Brenden, what's your story? What got you to where you are today?
Fantastic intro, Jeffrey. Wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for having me on. And yeah, absolutely. Story. Great way to start this off. So when I was in university, Jeffrey, I used to do these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were playing rugby or basketball or football, some other sport that you probably wouldn't see me playing, I did presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. And then as I got older, I started coaching students on how to communicate ideas effectively because I realized they wanted to win these competitions and they didn't have a coach. And the last experience was when I was a venture capitalist. I was a part of a student-run VC fund called Real Ventures. We have an arm called Front Row Ventures in Canada. And being a student investor, I had to source a lot of deals for technology startups that the fund would invest in. And I realized a lot of the CEOs that I worked with, who were younger at the time, were really good at building technology products, but terrible at communicating their stack in a way that someone who's non-technical when they're raising capital would understand it. So all of those ideas led to the creation of MasterTalk because I realized that a lot of the information I knew about communication wasn't available for free on the internet. So I started making videos in my basement. A few years later, turned to what it is.
Wow, hold on. Stop the presses. Did I hear you say that you're a VC? I love that. Granted, in school and you're doing all that, but welcome to your home, Brenden. Like, it doesn't get any better here on the Sell My Business podcast. We're going to talk communications. Maybe we'll go into a little bit on the VC side, but first on communication. So let's talk a little bit about this. So you started doing this back in school. You started helping students, then you graduated, and now you're doing what you're doing. So Brenden, when you're out there and you're working with professionals, let's look at it from two vantage points. You and I were entrepreneurs and the glass is always half full. We don't even know what a glass that's half empty looks like. So let's talk about that for just a moment. If you look at business owners and when they're making presentations and they're coming to you, what would be the top maybe 2 or 3 fatal mistakes that we tend to make?
Absolutely. So I would say in the context of business owners, Jeffrey, the number one mistake by far with business owners is they do not make their communication skills a priority in their business. And the reason that is the case is simply because they have so many things to think about, especially business owners who are doing under $1 million, because they're focused on every part of the value chain and they don't have enough resources to hire employees. So I'll give you a super easy example to help us understand this. Let's say you're a business owner doing 6 figures and multiple 6. You're doing sales and delivery of your product or service, most likely. So you're focused on getting more clients. You're focused on bringing more oxygen into the business. You're not focused on communicating more effectively or thinking about it more proactively. But the problem is, especially for the business owners who've already scaled, is communication becomes much more of a burning bridge because the communication between where you started with in the business versus where you are today, let's say 7 figures plus, essentially means you're delegating most of the work that you used to do as an entrepreneur to people who have zero exposure or some exposure into the business and your unique way of operating some procedures within the company. So if you don't master communication, you're not able to have those micro conversations to quickly upskill people that you're hiring to replace you in the business so you can focus on bigger strategic work for the company's long-term success. So that's the biggest problem that I see with businesses. They don't make it a number one priority.
And Brenden, I love that. And you know what? Let's scale this a little bit. And for the business owners out there, I don't care if you're 6 figures or if you're 9 figures, because it applies all the way through. But Brenden, with what you're saying, as business owners, if we don't make communications a priority, as we scale, as we grow, as we begin to hire people, it sounds like what you're saying is, as a business owner, I'm saying, well, you know what? So-and-so will just speak for me. I don't really have to work on this. I can just work on the business stuff. Someone else is going to be a better speaker than me. But this is the big one. When it comes to liquidity event, you can't outsource that. You need to be part of that presentation. And so making communication a priority right from the beginning, it just sounds like the gold standard. But what can they start doing today to make communications a priority for them that they can be that top 1%?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. It's really about setting that burning bridge to understand what that means in a liquidity event. So I'll give you an example. At the 8, 9 figure level, a lot of the companies I've seen that exit at those multiples and at those numbers, they have to stay in the company for a couple of months to even a couple of years to make sure that the exit is smooth in the transition. But part of that means selling your story as the CEO of the business. What is your competency? Why did you start it? What is the key around that? A great example I can give is Alex Hormozy recently. When he sold many of his companies, he had to stay on in some of the business. He's not 100% actively managing the company anymore, but he's still an advisor. So part of what you're saying, Jeffrey, that I completely agree with, is even if you're exiting your business, you need to know the story behind the company's origins, where it's going, and the future potential of the business so that it's attractive to a potential buyer. And you have to lead those conversations yourself because you're the one talking to the bankers. You're the one talking to all of those relationships because you're the person selling the dream of the business to somebody else.
And so, Brenden, when you're working with business owners and you're helping them on the communication side, do you focus at all on the narrative as well, or is it just on the communication side of things?
Great question. So I would say it depends on the context, Jeffrey. So let's say someone's operating a business and they want to just become better communicators within their organizations. I would say in that context, the focus is a lot more on communication technique. Because even entrepreneurs, a lot of those business owners, they don't have the foundations, the filler words, the pacing, the vocal tone variety. And the reason that's especially key at that level is it's not necessarily what you're communicating. That's important too. But the perception from your employees and other stakeholders on how you're coming across is just as important. So that's the one piece. The other piece around narrative is, I would say for me, my specialization has mostly been technology CEOs raising capital. That's where a lot of my narrative work comes into play, because when these tech CEOs are going to different VC funds or different investment vehicles to raise capital, seed, Series A primarily, that's mostly what I've focused on in my career. When they're raising capital, they have to sell the story of their business and specifically why they're the jockey to solve that problem moving forward. Because there could be, let's say, 10 companies with the same thesis for where the world's going, but it's up to that one specific person's jockey to say, hey, no, this is my problem to solve. I'm going to fix this in the same way. Just to give an easy example so people can understand this. Like the founding team of Airbnb, there's a lot of people who had that idea, but it was their thesis, their perspective on how that business was going to scale and the timing around that business and how they were solving their own problem that really made them the jockey to solve that.
What a terrific story. What a terrific narrative that you have, Brenden. And for our listeners, let's look at it from the perspective of that investor or of that buyer. In the 90-day deep wealth experience, step number 3, it's all about the future buyer. And for the business owners that have come out of the deep wealth experience, they know, hey, I can no longer be selfish and think like a seller. I need to start thinking like an investor, like a buyer. So, Brenden, let's reverse engineer it. With the investors and buyers that you've spoken to, and when you're putting together that narrative and the whole communication skill side of things, what are you finding really moves the dial for a buyer to hear? And I know you could easily say, well, Jeffrey, it depends on the company and it can get very specific, but let's talk best practices in terms of trust and that credibility. Hey, you know what? I can see myself doing business with Brenden. I love what I'm hearing. Seems like a terrific guy. What are they looking for from your experience to have them come to that conclusion?
Absolutely. I was about to respond that way, but I'm glad you jumped in with that pretext. So I'll answer and then feel free to jump in with the follow-up, Jeffrey. I'd love to hear from you. So I would say there's 3 key pieces that we want to think about as founders in that situation we're pitching to investors. The first one is unique founder perspective. So what do I mean by that? I call it founder point of view, where what is the point of view that you have as the business owner that is unique and special that ideally the person standing in front of you hasn't heard before or has understood it in the way that you currently understand it. So when you explain your business from a perspective that not many people think about, you derive new types of insights. I'll give you a simple example. Let's say you take somebody like Elon Musk. When he thought about his company with climate change, and I'm quoting from Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, which is a fantastic read on how to build the future, and especially in the technology space, which is my prime expertise. He talks a lot about why Tesla was one of the few climate change companies that actually stood out in the marketplace. And the main reason behind that is Elon understood that climate change wasn't just about saving people's lives, it's about still at the core creating a product or service that people absolutely wanted. And what Elon realized is that at the end of the day, people want to buy sexy cars at high premium prices. So before he got to a place where he could create a car that was, low margin, that a lot of people could use in the mass market, he realized earlier in the game that he had to create a high premium product at a high price point so people like Leonardo DiCaprio feel good about themselves when they buy that car. And what's interesting is that unique perspective is what allowed Elon to not only communicate his unique founder point of view, but obviously he had a track record to prove it too from previous exits. But that was the unique ethos, the secret sauce behind Tesla's success, whereas everyone else focused too much on solving climate change and not exactly creating a product or service that the customer actually wanted. So that's the first piece that I want to tackle. The second piece after founder point of view is traction. And this is what I tell all of my level technology clients is the perspective that you want to give to any investor is that you're a rocket ship taking off, regardless if you get that person's money or not, because I got 17 other meetings that week. So when you give that aura, that perspective, you don't need to be cocky, you don't need to be obnoxious, but you want to clearly communicate progress. And this is something I find especially women CEOs don't do enough of. And the reason is because we're taught as individuals not to brag about ourselves, not to showcase our accomplishments. I'll give you a quick example here, Jeffrey, super clear and concise for people. Let's say you take founder A. Founder A jumps in and says, yeah, I started the company a year ago. We're doing $2 or $3 million a year and we're poised for growth. And let's say that's the story. You're already tuned out. Versus, let's say founder B goes something like this. We started the company in January. We've raised X number of dollars. We already have X number of users. And this is our plan for the next 18 months. This is our growth targets. This is everything that we've hit so far. And we've already raised half of our round. We're already 50% subscribed. So notice how when we're communicating that progress, it really makes us feel like we want to be invested. And then the last piece on this is what is the number one reason why investors invest in companies? It is 100% without a hint of doubt, FOMO, the fear of missing out. If one of my buddies is investing in this company and I'm not, my biggest fear as a VC, especially from that context, is that I'm going to miss out because everyone has an L in that industry. Everyone has a startup that was in front of them, that was $1 billion company that they said no to. And your goal and your narrative, the way you're communicating an idea, is to prove to them that you're the one they're going to miss out on.
Okay, stop the presses. All of our listeners, stop what you're doing right now. I want you to take that last clip of what Brenden just said and just memorize that. Just listen to that 24/7 until you can say that verbatim, because Brenden, wow, you just hit that out of the park. And we really are talking the same language. At Deep Wealth, we use different words. But if I go back to the three areas that you're talking about, the founder point of view, love that. We call that WII.FM, the world's favorite radio station, the what's in it for me radio station. So you're really asking yourself, what does the buyer want to do? What's going to move the dial for the buyer? And I love the example that you gave with Elon Musk, where you said, hey, he's doing two things. He's having the rich and the successful and the wealthy and the famous feel good about themselves. They're doing something for the environment, but they're driving around in this really pricey, snazzy kind of car. And then with attraction, the traction and the FOMO, to me, are grouped together because you're talking about scarcity. As humans, we always want what we can't have. And so I just love how when you build into your narrative eloquently, so you're not putting it in someone's face, you just happen to be mentioning it. The subtext is, hey, if you miss out on this, don't think too long here, because if you don't do it, somebody else is, and you're going to regret it. We're already in your example, hey, we're 50% subscribed and moving quickly. So you've given us from the flip side of what buyers are looking for with the founder point of view, the traction, and the FOMO. I love it. Those are our three strategies we should all be incorporating in what we're doing. Let's now flip it. So let's go to the business owner side of things. So they've done the homework. They've even worked with you, Brenden, and they've got these strategies down pat. The delivery side of things, because you gave the two examples. And the first example that you gave, I was falling asleep and I had to wake up when you started saying, okay, speaker number 2, okay, the guy's done. Let's listen to what this other guy is doing. What kind of techniques or strategies do we need to do for ourselves to become dynamic speakers at top 1% in the industry? Can you share a little bit of your secret sauce?
Oh, I can share all of it, Jeffrey. Don't worry. Information is always free. That's the key. So here's the way I think about this, especially in the context of your audience. Let me point out a few things. Number one is everything that me and Jeffrey just shared. Don't be worried about it. This should actually be a joke for you if you're already a successful business owner. And the reason it's a joke is because your business is already successful. It's not a question of, oh my goodness, do I have all of the right components? No, the question is, I have all the right ideas. I have the answers, but am I framing those answers? Am I packaging those answers in the right way? So I want to make sure that context is understood. So everyone listening to this, especially if you're doing 7, 8, 9, your business is working. You have the leverage in that meeting, not the person who's buying your business. You're the one who knows the business better than them. You've spent more hours in them. You understand the core customers better. You just need to show that certainty, show that power that you do with your employees, the people you're managing, the people who already believe in you, to strangers you don't yet know. It's how do you transfer the trust that your employees already have in you, that all of your initial buyers, all your investors, the people who are your customers already trust and believe in you. And how do you just transfer that equal amount of certainty into people you don't know? It's just a question about transferring, not creating something new. So that's the first piece. The second piece to delivery, and this is my ethos whenever I coach people, is do the harder thing. So one exercise that I go through that people can just implement is called question drills. Question drills are very simple, and I'll use myself as an example here, is we've always been in a situation, even if we know our business is inside out, where somebody asks us a question that we don't 100% know the answer to, or it's a different way of looking at the problem that we didn't initially think of. Question drills help us bulletproof our presentations in the sense that every time you're preparing for a meeting, or you have high stakes communication situations, which in this case, raising capital would be one of them, exiting, liquidating, having conversation with bankers would be another one, since it's a small world and word spreads fast. You want to make sure that when you get into those meetings, you're hitting the home run. So what does that mean? That means sit down with the most critical people you know. I like mean better. People are nice in the sense that they want to see you mean, but they're rude. Like I like people who are critical. And what you do is you spend time with them, and their only goal when you pitch your business is to break you. They try and find questions they just throw at you. What about this? What about this? What about this? You think about this? What's your go-to-market 5 years from now? What's this? And they start drilling you with a bunch of questions. And here's the secret sauce. You won't know the answer to 50% of those questions if you do the exercise correctly. But since you're in a safe environment where there's no investors in the room, these are your buddies, these are your trusted friends, the people that you're coaching, that safe environment where no one is judged, what happens is you start to get an answer for everything. Why? Because if you don't know the answer, all you got to do is ask Jeffrey. Because if Jeffrey's in front of you and he's the one doing the drill, as an example, let's say he was in the room, if you're asking, let's say, and I'm the CEO being attacked on with questions, If I don't know the answer, I just ask you, hey, Jeffrey, that's a great question. How would you approach this if you were me? And then you start giving me your insights and I take notes on this. And then I'll give you a killer strategy with question drills that nobody does, especially in the tech space. Like, it bothers me so much to the extent is if you have an answer to a question, just make a backup slide on it. So that way you don't forget it. So let's say we're going through a question and we figure out an answer, make a backup slide. You don't need to present all of that to investors. But if you're in a situation where you forget, like your memory isn't as clear with one of the questions you practice, you can bring up slide 367 and boom, the answer's right there. And it helps you paraphrase and you look way more professional. Third piece that I'll go through, because I don't like excuses. Think about me, Jeffrey. I started coaching CEOs when I was 22 years old. And I was like mentioning that because it sets like a burning platform. And the reason I mention that is, why am I so proficient at communication? Why am I able to communicate at a level that someone who's 50 would be communicating with that level of experience? It's because when I started my business, I had my friends ask me 500-600 questions about communication. It's because, not because I'm smart than anyone, not because I'm unique, it's because I drilled more than anyone else in my industry. And that's why I'm able to communicate at the same level as you on this podcast. And that's what I encourage all of you. I always like saying that story because if I'm willing to do that at my age, imagine what you can all do who are listening to this. All of you have so much more experience. You have so much more wisdom. You've already spent 10, 15 years painstakingly building your businesses so you can do a simple question drill for 30 minutes a day.
Wow, Brenden, there is so much to unpack there with those 3 points. But man, you've just been doling out not the gold, the platinum, as I like to say on the podcast here. It's amazing what you're putting out there. And for our listeners, the takeaways are just one after the other. And the first point that you talk about it, hey, business owner, you have a successful business. So why are you worrying so much about this? Have fun. And if it doesn't work out, you're going back to your amazing business. And so you're coming from a position of strength. But Brenden, you also mentioned the T word, or the currency, because currency in business, it's not money. Their currency, it's trust. Can I trust you? Can you trust me? Because if you don't have trust, nothing's going to happen. You're not going to get new clients. You're not going to be able to get any deals that are done. So getting that trust to come out through the communications and how you're telling that narrative is key. But then I like what you said for steps 2 and steps 3 for the question drill and just the preparation. And as you're talking about that, and for all the listeners out there, pick your favorite action movie or your favorite superhero, whatever it is that moves the dial for you. I'm just picturing that superhero just practicing in the gym, out climbing the mountains or climbing and doing the push-ups and the pull-ups and all those things, just practicing and becoming better internally. So when you're out there doing your thing, you're just rocking it. But really, when all is said and done, Brenden, hearing you say is it's all in the preparation that you're doing. And the other big takeaway, who are you hanging around with? Are you hanging around really smart and successful people who know the questions to ask you that you can learn from? Or are you just wasting your time with people who just aren't doing that? So let's talk about when you're seeing business owners who are coming to you and they're saying, okay, you know what, Brenden? Yeah, I heard you on the podcast. I'm doing most of what you're saying. I just want to take it to the next level. You know, I'm pretty good. Help refine me. Just get me to that from maybe I'm in the top 20% to the top 1% now. So when you see business owners that are like, yeah, I've done a gazillion presentations. Come on, I've bought and sold companies and it's not a big deal. I do this all day long, Brenden. Tell me something I don't know. What is it that we don't know that you can share with us?
That's a beautiful question, Jeffrey. I love that. So let's go ahead and define top 1%. I love what you said. Is this fact or fiction? So I guess we're going to find out right now. So there's 3 qualities in how I define top 1% communicate in your industry. So that means, to keep this simple, let's say you're the CEO of an accounting firm. If there's 99 other CEOs who are also running accounting firms, how are you the number 1 communicator within the scope that you're playing in, within the sport that you're playing in? So how do I define that? 3 areas: motivation, direction, and technique. So the first one is motivation. Simple question, but I'll explain the meaning since this audience is a bit more mature than most, is when we think about motivation, it goes back to priority. The reason why a lot of us don't work on our communication skills is because we're successful. It's because we don't see it as a priority. So the question we need to ask ourselves and take very seriously is, how would our lives change if we were exceptional communicators? And we're already great communicators, but reflecting more on that. And I would argue on top of that, since a lot of people might be liquidating high multiples and they might want to create more impact in the world, not necessarily start another business, perhaps, everyone's different, I would flip that question to the one I ask myself all the time. How would the world change if you're an exceptional communicator? And don't just reflect on that question from one angle, I could just grow my business. No, it's much more to that. A lot of you have already grown your businesses. Think about the way you communicate to your families. Think about the way that you communicate to investors. Think about the way that you're meeting people when you travel. Communication is so much more than just giving a speech. It's every area of our lives. That's the first thing I would say, is reflecting on that question helps us play bigger. And if we don't play bigger, we don't have an incentive to communicate better, which brings me to number 2, direction. So you're right, Jeffrey. Absolutely. All of the people who are listening to this are already successful. And the way I define communication is super simple. It's for you to achieve a specific outcome for a specific audience. So I'll repeat that again. Communication is achieving a specific outcome for a specific audience. So if your goal is to sell $100,000 of product in a presentation and you suck at communication, but you get your 100, I don't have any feedback for you. I don't, because you achieved the outcome that you want. But now the question becomes, do you just want to stay in that category, or do you want to play a bigger game? And that's what the 1%ers are always thinking about. They're always working on themselves. And I would argue a lot of people listening to this are the top 1%, because that's why they're listening to this episode. They're working on themselves. So this comes back to direction. A lot of us have goals in many areas of our life, Jeffrey, whether it's health, whether it's relationships, whether it's career, but almost nobody has communication goals for communication. And the reason a lot of people don't think about this is because communication is a very vague subject. What does being a great communicator even mean? Does it mean being on a stage? Does it mean giving a TED talk? It's not very well defined. And that's the problem. When you get vague outcomes or results, you get vague goals. Or rather, because you have vague goals, you get vague results. So now the question becomes, how do you come up with very specific and tangible communication goals? And the way that I found that has worked really well for me and my client base and the people I coach is being very specific about the human being that you want to be. I'll give you a super easy example. Let's say you're a technology CEO that I can speak to really well, and you want to communicate really well. Make a list of 3 tech CEOs in your industry that are just absolutely killing it at presentations. They're so good at communication. Mark Benioff from Salesforce, Satya Nadella, I love him from Microsoft. I think he's really solid as well. Just picking speakers that you really admire and asking yourself, what is the gap between them and you? And don't just analyze that from a presentation perspective. Watch their interviews. Watch the way they show up on podcasts. Like, I give an example. Peter Thiel is terrible at speaking. He's not very good at presentation skills. But when it comes to being a fireside chat where he's being asked questions, he's much better. He's much more proficient there. And the last technique is just how consistently are you practicing your communication skills? I'll give you a super simple example. I'll throw it back to it. I've been rambling for a while now. Let's say we take the random word exercise. Pick a random word, present it out of thin air. That sounds like a childish exercise for an 8-figure entrepreneur. I'll prove to you why it isn't. The reason this is so effective is it helps you make sense out of nonsense. So if I just give you avocado, you might think it's stupid, but for the top 1%ers, they'll figure out how to make it work. Because if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything.
Just more gold, more platinum there, Brenden, just to start on unpacking. But really, my big takeaway, and for the listeners, I hope you're hearing what I'm hearing. And it comes down to, I'll call it mindset, but also really preparation. Because look, I've spoken to business owners that I know they're going to be successful, but they just started out. They're in a startup, and I've spoken to billionaires. And the one thing that they all have in common, the billionaires, I mean, they could have stopped a long time ago, but they're always learning. They're pushing themselves to the next level. It doesn't matter how many zeros are in the bank account. It's a personal challenge. And that's their rocket fuel to take them to the next level. And the ones that are in the startups that you know are going to be successful, and you track their progress and they break through and they make it, it's just they're always practicing. So Brenden, I'm hearing you loud and clear. Communication, make communication part of what you practice, part of what you focus on. What gets measured is what gets done. So let's look at it from this perspective. And I'm thinking of a scenario where we're going to put all of this together. So we have a presentation coming up. And so we've done the preparation. We've been practicing, Brenden, all these strategies that you've been teaching us. We've tuned into WII.FM, and we know what's in it for the buyer, so that we're going to be speaking to them on that narrative. How do we keep our cool when we're coming up for those big presentations? And then what should we be thinking as we head into that presentation just to come out the other side achieving our objective?
Absolutely. I wish I could give you a breathing exercise that would help, Jeffrey, but unfortunately, that's not how I roll. I would say for me, brother, the way that we overcome this, the way that we do this is a couple of things. The first one is realizing that confidence is not an accident. It is not an accident. And one of my coaches tells me this all the time. He says, competence leads to confidence. So the reason why a lot of CEOs aren't stressed out in some of these meetings that they have with investors is because when they practice outside of that boardroom, that scenario, that simulation was 10 times harder. So I'll give you an example. Let's say CEO comes up to us and says, Brenden, Jeffrey, I'm worried about this presentation I have with investors. We're raising like $1 million round, let's say, or 5 million, whatever the number is. And I'm really worried. I say, perfect. So you're going to come tomorrow and I'm going to bring a bunch of people who've already raised 10, 15, and they're going to be much worse. And we're going to make their life a living nightmare so that when they walk into that 3-hour meeting, wow, that meeting was really easy. So that's the way I think about it. I feel that's the only way. And the reason I'm speaking in a very aggressive way is because of the specific audience we're speaking to. If we were speaking to executives and companies, I wouldn't say it that way. And the reason I say it this way for the 7, 8, 9 figure, whatever, the business owners here, is because we need to get the urgency. People don't get this. And I'm sure you coach them a lot on this as well, Jeffrey, in your programs and what you're doing, the work that you're doing with them, is people need to understand how important it is to ace this meeting as it's a do or die meeting. Because all those bankers, whether it's Deutsche, whether it's Goldman, whether it's Morgan Stanley, doesn't matter. They all know each other. It's not like some isolated room where none of the bankers know each other. They all talk to each other. They're all keeping in touch because the community is so small. So when you have that level of urgency, you'll do whatever it takes to win in the same way that you did whatever it took to win for your business. In the same way you did whatever it took to win to hire the right person. It's the same analogy. It's just what I find, which honestly surprised me a lot in my years of doing this, is nobody's applying that same level of urgency in a meeting with investors to sell the business and realizing they only got one shot at this thing. They got multiple shots, but you get what I mean. So that's the key. Competence leads to confidence, be the first piece so that they can keep their cool. Second one is always do the harder thing outside of that boardroom. But the third thing, and this is more for my mission-driven business owners who are listening to this, who feel that sense of mission within them, this might help. One thing that I always talk about is this idea of message versus fear. So let's say we take a boxing match, Jeffrey, and one side of the ring is the fear and the other side is the message. The goal is not to remove the fear from the ring. And the reason why I say this is because even the most polished experts in the world on communication have some level of fear. And I'm not saying I'm one of those people. I'm still trying to get better. I always have a lot more room to grow for myself. But I'll give you a quick example. Let's say me and you are having a conversation. Let's say we're at a restaurant and somebody calls me and it's Elon Musk. And he says, hey, Brenden, I just need you to coach me on my communication for a few hours tomorrow. Do you mind coming down to the Gigafactory or something? I'd probably shit my pants. It doesn't matter how many clients I've worked with. There's always a level that scares all of us. So the goal is not to remove the fear or the uneasiness or some anxiety that we might have in that boardroom with the investor, but rather making sure that when the fear and the message meet in the middle of that boxing ring, that your message wins the match, that your message gets the knockout punch. Going back to me, the reason I like using myself as an example is if I can do it, people are listening to this should have zero excuses. I had every excuse in the book not to start YouTube, not to start my business, not to start MasterTalk. I could have waited until I had a mortgage or something. I could have waited until anything. Society would have cut me some slack because I was still getting started. But why did I press record? Why did I spend the years honing my craft? I did it for the 15-year-old girl who couldn't afford me. Sure, I love my executive clients, my business owners, they're all great. But the reason why I take MasterTalk so seriously is because I know there's a 13-year-old Elon Musk right now in the world. There's probably some girl in Utah who can't afford a communication coach. So I use a lot of the money I make in coaching to make my media, which is the real end game for me, more accessible to people so I could be the next Dale Carnegie in my space. So I can make all of these tools available for the world. That mission drives me so much that there's nothing that's going to get in my way. What is that mission for you and your business? And when you have that same level of clarity, there's no investor that will get in your way.
You know, Brenden, whoever said business is not personal never owned a business. And I just love that passion that's just oozing out of you and how you're paying it forward and making a difference. Why don't you talk to us about MasterTalk? How are you changing the world? What is it? If I came to you now as a business owner, what can I expect?
So for me, I would say Master Talk, my mission in life is to help every human being on earth become exceptional communicators, especially the next geniuses of our society. I think the next Elon Musk is probably some 7-year-old girl in Cambodia, somebody that we don't see or hear, but because that person doesn't have access to tools. Like imagine this, Jeffrey, this is what gets me out of bed, is, when Elon was 15 years old, nobody cared about him. Nobody's spending any time helping that person succeed. And that's really what lights a fire in what I do. So my mission is really to help everyone else. But now the goal is, how do I achieve that? And I would say the first part of that mission is through my coaching business. So I help a lot of executives, primarily in the technology space, and some entrepreneurs level up their communication skills so I can leverage a lot of the incredible resources I get from them to make the media side more accessible to everyone else. So that's the mission, what I do.
Congratulations with that, Brenden. You don't always see it. You don't always hear it. And what a way to just be able to put that all together and to do it. Brenden, I could talk hours, days of all of these techniques and strategies. We're starting to bump up against some time. So let's do this. As we begin to wrap up the episode, I have a question for you. It's a bit of a thought experiment. And the question is this. Think about the movie Back to the Future. In the movie, you have that magical DeLorean car that will take you to any point in time. So Brenden, it's tomorrow morning, you look outside your window, and there it is. The DeLorean car is not only there, but the door is open. It's waiting for you to hop on in, and you now get to go to any point in your life. Brenden, as a young child or a teenager, whatever the point in time would be, what are you telling yourself, Brenden, in terms of life lessons or, hey, do this, but don't do that? What does that sound like?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I could say there, Jeffrey. So I'll give you 3 to keep it simple. So the first one is I would take a quote from Tony Robbins, who's one of my biggest mentors in life. And he says it best, the quality of your life is solely determined by the quality of the questions. And I would add that you dare to ask. When you ask yourself powerful questions about life, clarity ensues. And that's the first piece of advice I would give is wake up every morning and ask yourself one hard question about life. And I'll give you a couple to get started. If you could only accomplish 3 things before you die, what would you want those 3 things to be and why? If you only had 3 lessons to share with the world, what would you share and why? And the third question would be, if you had all the money in the world, if I gave everyone on this podcast $1 billion, which unfortunately I won't be able to today, but it's a good thought experiment, is what would you do with your time? You don't have to work anymore. You don't have to build a business. What would you do with your time? These are questions that give us insights and clarity that no statement could ever give us. That's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is realize who the enemy is. The enemy is not the neighbor who's yelling at us. It's not the person in traffic. It is time. Time is the finite resource we can never buy back. We can never build leverage against in the same way that we can do with capital or any other means or resource that we might have. So understand that if you're young, especially if you're under 40, you are what one of my mentors calls a time billionaire, right? So even if you're 80 years old, you got all the money in the bank, you can't buy the time back. So once you realize that time is the true enemy that you're always clocking against, want to make sure that you're very intentional about how you spend every minute for the rest of your life. And the third piece of advice that I would share is my favorite for those who made it to the end of this episode, which I say congratulations. You're clearly the top 1% in Jeffrey's audience, is be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you want to do something special, like everyone else who's listening to this already have based on your audience and how you've described them, Jeffrey, you already know that the way to do that is to be crazy. Don't you find it odd that I started a YouTube channel, not on pranks, not on music, not on rapping, but on public speaking and executive communication? And then I went to coach those same executives for money, things I never thought I'd be able to do, yet I still live in my mother's basement. I don't own a car. I'm in the 0.5, not 5%. I'm in the 0.5% of top listeners on Spotify for Justin Bieber, and I can karaoke in 8 languages. How does any of this make any sense at all? And that, my friend, is the point. When every decision in your life makes sense to the only person that it should, which is you're probably making the right decisions. So be insane or be the same.
Wow, Brenden, a man of many talents and lots of wisdom. You are a wise old soul. And not only did you give 1 point, you gave 3 points. So you tripled up there. Talk about value and paying that forward. So Brenden, we're going to have in the show notes, we're going to make it really easy for all of our listeners. It'll be point and click. If somebody would like to reach you online, what would be the best place?
Absolutely. What a wonderful conversation, Jeffrey. I love your question. I love the space. So thanks for facilitating this. It's great. Yeah, so two easy ways to keep in touch. The first one is definitely the YouTube channel, MasterTalk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And the second way, for those who are interested in coaching, you can come to one of my free interactive live trainings on effective comms. It's not a webinar. I'm coaching people on that call. It's a lot of fun. I do it every few weeks. And if you want to register for that, it's rockstarcommunicator.com.
Love it. Rockstarcommunicator.com. And MasterTalk on YouTube will have all those links. And for our audience, again, just come to the show notes, point and click, and you're there. Well, you know what, Brenden, we are officially wrapping up, and a heartfelt thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Deep Wealth Sell My Business podcast. And as always, please stay healthy and safe.
Thank you, brother.
The Deep Wealth experience was definitely a game changer for me.
This course is one of the best investments you will ever make, because you will get an ROI of 100 times that. Anybody who doesn't go through it will lose millions.
If you don't have time for this program, you'll never have time for a successful liquidity.
I mean, it was the best value of any business course I've ever taken. The money was very well spent.
Compared to when we first began, today I feel better prepared, but in some respects, maybe less prepared, not because of the course, but because the course brought to light so many things that I thought we were on top of that we need to fix.
I 100% believe there's never a great time for a business owner to allocate extra hours into his or her week or day. So it's an investment that will yield results today. I thought I will reap the benefit of this program in 3 to 5 years down the road. But as soon as I stepped forward into the program, my mind changed immediately.
There was so much value in the experience that the time I invested paid back so much for the energy that was expended.
The Deep Wealth experience compared to other programs is the top. What we learned is very practical. Sometimes you learn stuff that is great to learn, but you never use it. The stuff we learned from Deep Wealth experience, I believe is going to benefit us both.
I've done an executive MBA. I've worked for billion-dollar companies before. I've worked for smaller companies before I started my business. I've been running my business successfully now for getting close to a decade. We're on a growth trajectory. Reflecting back on the Deep Wealth, I knew less than 10% what I know now. Maybe close to 1% even.
Hands down, the best program in which I've ever participated. And we've done a lot of different things over the years. We've been in other mastermind groups, gone to many seminars, workshops, conferences, retreats, read books. This was so different. I haven't had an experience that's anything close to this in all the years that we've been at this. It's 5-star, A+.
I would highly recommend it to any super busy business owner out there. And Deep Wealth is an accurate name for it. This program leads to deeper wealth and happier wealth, not just deeper wealth. I don't think there's a dollar value that could be associated with such an experience and knowledge that could be applied today and forever.
Are you leaving millions on the table? Please visit www.deepwealth.com/success to learn more. If you're not on my email list, you'll want to be. Sign up at www.deepwealth.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Sell My Business podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Reviews help me reach new listeners, grow the show, and continue to create content that you'll enjoy. As we close out this episode, a heartfelt thank you for your time, and as always, please stay healthy and safe.